Hello everyone, good afternoon on this beautiful day on July 10th. I want to show an exciting game today. This game is between between two familiar faces in internet chess. One is with the white pieces is Danny Rensch, rated about 2200 at the time with the white pieces. And Danny Rensch is the face of chess.com for those of you who do not know, and who is now an international master. But at this time, in 2000, at the Foxwoods Open, in round one, he was about 2200. Again, he had the white pieces. With the black pieces, familiar face is Maurice Ashley, who had just became a grandmaster and whose rating at the time was exactly 2500. So I want to show you this game because it's you know, a lot of these players really don't you don't get to see their actual games in practice because everybody always wants to look at the top players, Carlsen, Nakamura, etc. And you should, but it's cool to see commentators' games, and you get to see that they were good players. They might not have been the top of the top, but they were good players in their own right. So enjoy this game. Again, Danny Rensch has the white pieces and Maurice Ashley with the black pieces, and I am showing it from the black perspective. Okay, so Danny Rensch started off with d4, knight f6 for Maurice, bishop g5. There we go to Trompowsky. And I did 3 videos on the Trompowsky. One was Gary Kasparov versus the Trompowsky. The other was Anatoly Karpov versus the Trompowsky. And the other was Magnus Carlsen versus the Trompowsky. So if you have any trouble facing that opening, look at those videos. Or pick one of those players and you can't go wrong. And you should have no problems with this opening. Maurice plays my favorite way to play against it. Just simply d5. Right, not not worrying about the double pawns. White is giving up a bishop. You have the 2 bishops, and he's opening lines for you, so you have to be okay. E3, bishop d6, c4. Another line that prevents the early c4. I mean, this is a matter of move order, and if you study this opening a lot, you come to prefer a move like bishop e6, which slows down this possibility of c4 right away because your bishop is there. So it's just a little nuance to keep in mind. But that's what I play. Right? I play bishop e6 first. All right. So nothing wrong here though. Maurice played bishop d6, but c4 is an option now. And this is another good line. If you look at my videos, Gary Kasparov versus Trompowsky, he played this way, and this position takes on similar look to the Dutch defense from the black pieces. After bishop takes c4, castles, knight c3, and then f5, and that's what I mean by a similarity to the Dutch. This pawn that was doubled is now a useful pawn in the fray, and for white to make any kind of advance, that would immediately relieve black of his doubled pawn there. So that pawn is going to be there for a while. And then black's plan is very simple. You see some of the moves already. It's castle, first is d takes, because one of the things with d takes c4 is, remember, black has the 2 bishops. So he would like, the position to take on an open, look. All right, so it opens the position with d takes c4. Then he plays bishop d6, castles, and then he's going to take the knight that's on b8 and put it on f6. This is a common strategy. And basically, that signals to white that he's giving up his dark square bishop for absolutely nothing. Because one of the reasons bishop takes f6 is to remove a defender from the king side, along with doubling the pawns. But what happens is, in this particular line, is f5 makes the double pawn extremely useful, as it controls a critical square, e4, and the knight on the queen side just simply replaces the knight that was gone. So in essence, black has just basically, just white has just wasted time. So here, I mean, black is completely fine. Knight d7 at the queen f3. Notice, he's not even worried about this pawn being taken. It doesn't look right, and it's not right, because at the knight e5, white would be lost. So this is why he can play knight d7 here. Then he played knight g e2 and knight f6. So you see black has a comfortable position here. Castle, c6, h3, queen e7 by Maurice, knight g3. And this is one of white's strategies, of course, is to try to argue that this pawn is a liability. g6 protecting the pawn. Rook fe1. And bishop d7. a3. And there's some ideas of expanding on the king side, on the queen side in the future. And black wants to, of course, attack on the king side. All I usually think of in this position is basically play it like you would a Dutch defense. I played the Dutch for a long time, and I know the themes, and that's what I think of when I see a position like this. So rook a e8. And Maurice is fully developed, and all he needs to really do now is just kind of open up the position, which would be in his favor. So knight f1 is played. The knight jumps into e4, all common themes when you're trying to build up an attack on the king side. Now rook ec1. And white's play seems a little slow to me. He hasn't really gotten anything going on the queen side yet. Whereas black is all set to go. Knight g5, harassing the queen. The queen drops back to e2. And now Danny has to be careful already with the queen here in direct opposition to these two heavy pieces, queen and rook. Because already a move like f4, getting rid of this pawn is a good look for black. For instance, e takes f5, e takes f4. And just simply bishop takes f4, hitting the rook. Queen takes, and rook takes. And that's excellent for black. The position is starting to open. White has an isolated pawn, two bishops. So black is definitely better here. Maurice didn't play that move. Instead, he moved his queen first to f6. Okay, so just leaving the rook and the queen opposed. Danny played queen d3, getting his queen out of dodge, which is a good policy. Bishop b8, and of course with with the knight here, which is protecting right now, white still has to be careful of maneuvers like this in the future. But basically, Maurice is just clearing this, the D file somewhat, because he's gonna have to reposition his rooks down the road, and the bishop is pretty much optimally placed, and so he moves it out the way. B4, so we see the queen side counterplay coming now from Danny, and now F4, right, using this to attack. Now the game starts to get pretty sharp here. So H4, and Maurice played knight e6. Now interesting is F takes e3 here, and because I was looking at this when I first looked at the game, I saw this move F takes e3 because you have this queen check here. So for example, if F takes e3, then queen takes f2. King h1, queen h4, And then you have a real strong move here. See, and you had this attack on the king. You remember you had this bishop here earlier. So the only thing that's kind of holding things together is this move right here. So let's say after king g1, I mean, of course, you had the perpetual in hand, and that's always good to have because that gives you that extra boldness. You know, you can draw if you blow a move, you can get that perpetual in. But here's a killer move is b5 right here. Notice the bishop doesn't really have that many squares to go. So say he drops back, right? Natural move, protecting the bishop. Now you play queen f2 again. King h1. And then e2. And that's the idea behind playing b5 is you get rid of a defender of the e2 square. So the bishop, drops back. That's this guy. Okay. And then play could go, for instance, knight g3 and bishop f5, harassing the queen. And then say after that, right, because white would definitely want to trade queens there, then you just recover your piece. And black is winning in that position. But who knows what the time situation was or whatever. But I just wanted to point that out to you. So after h4, f takes e3 is definitely the move. But Maurice here opted for knight e6. And bishop takes e6 from Danny Rensch. And here is a critical point in the game. Now, Maurice played f takes e6 here. And normally, f takes e6 would be like, the move, because in the Dutch, and I keep saying the Dutch defense because that's what the structure looks like. But in these defenses, these type of defenses, black often wants to open up the f file. So it instinctually it makes sense to play f takes e6 and then later play the other f pawn, the one that's on f4, f takes e3, and then you have the rook and queen all concentrated on the f file. But however, it doesn't work out tactically because Danny is alert and finds a great move. So after f takes e6, right, which I'll go ahead and say wasn't the best move, Danny Rensch plays e4, just keeping the position closed. So now the f file is not open, but you have this pawn here, and you just kill this bishop on d7. Now I want to go back and show you if he took with the bishop. If you take with the bishop, you see how lively that bishop is. And the idea here is say bishop takes e6, e takes f4, and then rook d8. Right? You just reposition your rooks to the e and d files. And play can go like that. And notice how good that light square bishop looks in this position. Right? And again, black is just in the driver's seat. Better pawn structure, two bishops, etc., etc. Black is very close to winning in this position. However, after f takes e6, the position is kind of anti-bishop, so to speak. Danny Rensch has two knights, and Maurice has the two bishops. So this position is kind of anti-bishop because there's not a lot of open diagonals here. And f takes e6 was critical and just killed the bishop. Now he might have overlooked the fact that Danny would play e4 here. If he had another move, if Maurice could move again, he probably open this f file up, and then there would be no problem. But Danny had a turn, so he played e4, and he just sacrificed his pawn, played in dynamic fashion. He did what he had to do here. Now, of course, material is material though, so black is better, but This gives white a little bit more chance to fight. He has this full pawn center, which is which is formidable, and he has the bishops kind of shut out of the game. Then he plays e5, so now he kills both of these bishops. Very instructive here. Now Maurice sees what's going on. The rook is hampered, and he plays the move rook d8. So he just wants to switch over to this file. His plan, of course, is to move this bishop out the way. His bishops have horrible, time right now, so he wants to move the bishop out of the way and concentrate his forces on the d pawn. Now, I think an interesting move here. There's two moves that, again, just on quick, glance when I first was going over this game, the natural move, right, f3, and of course rook f5, the old rook lift. Every as Yermolinsky would say, every Russian schoolboy knows about the rook lift. Usually you would go to f6 and h6, but you gotta make little modifications. The pawn is here, so you go up here and then you play this idea. So if rook f5, let's say knight e4, right, coming to these dangerous squares. This other rook, knight fd2 and rook h5, and you can have play in this manner. And then black shouldn't be afraid to give up the exchange in that type of position. And I think here black is probably winning, actually. So that's just one little sample variation, but definitely rook f5 with the idea of rook h5 and attacking down the h file. The other move is f3, and again another sample line trying to keep the position closed. G3, queen h3, knight e3, defending g2, of course. Bishop c7. What else to do with the bishop? Knight e4 again, bishop d8, and that was the idea of bishop c7, is to try bishop d6, bishop g5. The idea here is to remove the defender of the g2 square, queen f1, and then going into this ending. And this is like a murky position because there's no open files. Again, this is an anti-bishop type position. It's a position, it's good for knights, and that's why I was showing you these variations too, because I wanted you to see how the knights are hopping around. Okay, and it's an important thing that the bishop knight configuration was determined very early in the game. That white gave up the pair of bishops right away, so that's like a signal for you to try to strive to keep the position bishop friendly. I know that's how I would play. Soon, like if somebody, like if I say I play a Ruy Lopez and somebody does Ruy Lopez exchange in the early in the game, I already know, okay, I had the bishop here. I gotta make this position. I gotta make sure the position stays bishop friendly. So I have to have my good diagonals, and I want to make sure if he has knights, to try to keep the outpost possibilities limited. So here again we see there's a lot of issues here, and this gives white again like compensation, right? He's down a pawn, but he has this compensation, and because of the lack of open files. And because it's definitely anti-rooks also. The rooks on both sides can't really do much. But definitely you can see the difference between the bishops and knights. Unfortunately for white, one of his knights, this one on f1, is stuck on defensive duty. After e5, kills these bishops. And then you can see, again, the outpost. If you just visualize, you would love to put, a knight here. Knight here. There's all kind of opportunities for the knights. You know, so just remember that. So rook d8 was played, knight d2. So once Danny, uh, shut down these bishops, now he's like, okay, I can, I'm safe. I can bring my knights out. And that knight's coming to f3, of course, to harass the queen. So bishop c8, knight f3, and queen h5. Danny plays queen c4. And keeping an eye on this pawn. Excuse me. G5 by Maurice. And again, this idea is very common. The pawn storm on the king side, G4, G5, G4 coming from black. Knight e4. Here's some counterplay. G4. So Maurice is prepared to play rook takes f6 if the knight jumps in there. That would be a mistake anyway because he would lose both knights. So knight fd2. Rook to d5. And now he wants to play the other rook to d8. Again, this pawn is a bit of a liability for white. Knight f1. Now he drops back to g6. And rook e1 is played. He doesn't really want to just hop in here. I mean, I know it looks very tempting, but that would not be good at this point. I mean, black can easily just give up the exchange here. Because, again, as I said earlier, this position is not friendly to the rooks. There's no open file. So that's a perfect scenario where you give up the exchange like that. For a strong knight, you would definitely give up the exchange. So rook e1, king g7, rook a d1, rook fd8 piling up there. And now you can play knight f6 because there's no nobody guarding f6. So knight f6. And here's Ashley's idea. Now notice you have the two rooks here, and it's opposed by two rooks connected on the d file. So his plan was to play bishop takes e5 here. And of course, not the move d takes e5, because then you would just capture twice on d1. Then you'd be down a piece. But after bishop takes e5, knight takes d5, e takes d5, and queen c5. So here Maurice gives up the exchange. However, I think and then he plays bishop d6, harassing the queen. Queen takes a7. I think one major difference here though is the e file is now open. Alright. And so the position is a little bit better as far as, for the rooks. But Maurice now has a little more scope for his bishops. Notice his bishops have improved. Okay, remember the obstruction here on the on e6 and e5. These two pawns right here, this one and this one, killing these two bishops. And this is probably what Maurice was thinking here. Like, I would have to ask him if I had the opportunity, but I'm sure he saw these two bishops and he decided to tempt Danny here with the exchange. So again, bishop takes e5, knight takes d5, e takes d5, queen c5, bishop d6, and just like magic, the two bishops are back in business again. Queen takes a7, and now the rook comes back to the f file, rook f8. And now here's a critical point. I don't know if these players were in time pressure or what. I don't have that information. But here, remember the plans that I spoke about in the beginning, that white was going to play on the queen side, black on the king side. And we see that is taking place, although there's been some drama, in the center of the board. Here is very important for white to realize what the new state of affairs in the position is. White has to realize that those bishops are very active, in that black, if given the opportunity, is going to finish his attack on the queen side. Another thing to note too that's interesting is that even though there's an open file for the rook cannot penetrate without giving, of course, giving up the exchange. So the file is open, but it's pretty much ineffective. So Maurice's idea here with rook f8 is basically to perform the old rook lift. Simple as that. He wants to play queen h5, rook f6 to rook h6, and then put the king here, and the queen there, and shake hands with Danny. So what Danny has to do is keep harassing black and keep him occupied. One of the major features in this position is the exposed nature of the white king, of the black king. Although this file cannot be occupied by the rook, the king is still open. And the best move here for white is b5, threatening simply just to take here when this move is impossible because of the pin. I'll give you an example. Say Danny plays b5, and say he tries to go along with this plan I just mentioned, queen h5. Then simply b takes c6, and there's no time for Maurice to play rook. I'll just play it anyway. Rook f6 because of c takes b7. Right, just to give you a heads up of actually what's going on. And then if he, plays rook f7, just anticipating things, well, then the bishop is hanging. So now queen a8. All right. So in other words, the harassment of the queen side pawns by white is enough to keep black honest, and whereby he can't just burn all his bridges and go all out on the king side, because he has to keep an eye on what's going on over there. In the game, Danny made a mistake. He played the move queen a4. Now it seems that he was trying to get back to the queen's the king side for some reason to protect, figuring his queen would be more effective over on that side of the board. Because after queen a4, Maurice played queen h5, just going along with the simple plan. And then Danny played queen b3. So obviously he wanted to pull his queen away from the queen side for some reason, to perhaps try to defend on this side of the board. Maybe worried about moves like f3 somehow. But this is based on miscalculation. And after queen b3, Maurice just simply played rook f6. Now notice, contrast this position with what I showed you in the previous variations, where white plays b5. So here, Maurice had all the time in the world just to play queen h5, rook f6, and then rook h6 without any interference from white. And this is basically what tips the scales. So after rook f6 happened, knight d2, and it's kind of too little too late, rook h6. Of course, knight d2, trying to prepare an escape route for the king. King f1, queen h1 check, king e2. But now here's the kicker, rook e6 check. And now Danny Rensch resigned, because if king if king d3, then he just drops the rooks. Okay, of course, queen e3, rook takes e3, knight e4, rook takes e4. So the game was over there. But that was a pretty good game. It's interesting. White fought pretty hard. I enjoyed this idea that after, you can see why Danny became an IM. Already he was playing pretty good. Again, Maurice was probably at his peak here. He just got the GM title, I think a few months before, and but I really enjoyed this idea after Maurice played f4 and excuse me, f takes e6 and then e4, shutting these bishops down. I thought that was very critical and gave white good chances. But then I really like Maurice's counter idea later on of basically baiting him with the exchange, because I had showed you here that, or actually I showed you in this position, that knight f6 was no good because of, you know, the simply giving up the rook, where for the strong knight, where these two rooks would be useless. But it seems like Maurice kind of baited him by taking the other rook off duty, and so when he jumped in there, looks like he's just, you know, making a big positional error. All of a sudden he comes with this idea: bishop takes e5, knight takes d5, e takes d5, and breaking the blockade. And then we see the bishops going on, you know, to resume their glorious career. But even still, with the bishops, if Danny finds b5 here, then he's still in the game. The game is still fighting affair. And I showed you what happens if queen h5, but the correct move in this situation would just be simply c takes b5, then queen b6 for white. And again, it's very double-edged, but it's basically black is still in control here. He just has to be careful because of his you know, this king condition. But the reason behind queen b6 in this variation, again, it just ties black down enough where he cannot just go all out for a kingside attack with this queen h5, rook f6, rook h6 that happened in the game. For instance, if he moves the queen to h5, then the bishop gets captured on d6. So that was like the major idea, is that white needed to give black some things to think about. In this position, black would probably best play moves like f3, sacrificing this pawn. Play gets very sharp, but again, when you had the two bishops, you want the position open as much as possible, because these bishops, they're very dangerous in an open position. All right, so again, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I'll try to find some more like obscure matchups like that if I can. All right, so please like it, subscribe, and all that good stuff, and comment, and you know, good friendly comments. And if you don't have nothing, you know how it is, nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all. You know, that's about it, because sometimes, man, people be like hating whatever, and I'm like, man, if you don't, you know, like the content, just keep it moving. You know, nobody cares, you know, for some, you know, test negativity. You know, criticism is one thing, but just some negativity is different. But anyway, you know, I appreciate all the support and fans out there, and you know, subscribers are building up, because what I'm realizing is people stop in this channel, and you know, I don't have the best setup. You know, I'm not a professional you know, commentator and all that stuff, but I have been playing chess for a very long time. You know, I'm pushing you know, to give you the best commentary that I can give, you know, give you the real deal. I mean, I have a coach who's a top grandmaster. You know, I just try to, like I said, I usually don't put a lot of stuff out there, like, you know, because I don't want people to think like, oh, who's this guy think he is and stuff like that. But I want the content to speak for itself. And if you go over the videos, you're getting true, you know, chess knowledge, you know, and you'll improve. So anyway, that's enough of me talking about that, and I see you guys on the next video.